If I ask you to identify intelligence, what would you say? Is it a test score, a quick wit, the ability to solve a puzzle? What if intelligence was more than book smarts? What if it also included how you adapt to life, solve real world problems, and even create something entirely new? Today, we're diving into the triarchic theory of intelligence to explore how intelligence isn't just one thing, it's a whole spectrum. All right. So intelligence, specifically Sternberg, he has the three sub-theories: contextual, experiential, componential. And as we think about those, it's real easy to come up with um, stories, I bet, that we all have seen these in action. So what about this first one, contextual? Or what would be a better way to put contextual sub-theory?
They were talking about applied, right? Practical intelligence. When we talk about contextual, some of the key skills there, George: adaptability, social skills, problem solving. And the real world examples of that are with the contextual piece. This gets into really practical intelligence, or what we oftentimes refer to as street smarts. And so these are folks that are able to navigate and figure out difficult things and problems, not necessarily in an academic way, right? But again, they're able to apply whatever it may be.
Right. I actually really love this type of learning because you are learning in real time and adapting to situations. So for an example, I've been on the crisis team with the fire department for well over a decade now. So every scene that we respond to is very unique. So this type of learning, we think of it as that practical type of learning when you're on scene somewhere, or even for our students, like if they're in a practicum setting, they're learning. But on the crisis team, every situation that we go on is unique, right? So maybe I'm going to a situation where there's a home fire and we have to adapt to the surroundings that we're in right there. Or maybe I'm responding to a situation where there's a severe car accident and someone has passed away. So we have to adapt to the family there as well. And always learning, like, what do we need to do in this particular situation to work with the families, with the first responders. So this type of practical learning, Craig used the word street smarts, that type of thing. It is learning in motion. It is taking the information that we already know and taking in the information from the current situation we're in and using those two frames of information, what we know, what we're in this current situation, adapting it to practical learning and intelligence in real time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so from what I'm gathering, the sub-theory contextual really has a lot to do with the environment, the surroundings.
Right.
You have to be very aware of what's going on around you, which makes a lot of sense. I can see why we call it street smart sometimes, because you have to be aware of your environment and you're learning and adapting. So that's why they're able to make decisions under pressure, I guess would be a good way to put it, because
Right.
as things are happening there, so probably a lot of the firefighters that you work with, or a lot of the first responders, are pretty contextually intelligent because they're making a lot of decisions under a lot of pressure. What do you think?
Absolutely. Again, it's real-time decisions in the moment. And we work alongside the police department, the fire department. Again, every situation is so unique. You have to be able to respond and have this contextual, practical intelligence under high stress situations too. So learning how to adapt as information comes in. I know right now we have seen what's been going on in Texas with all the floodings. And so currently we're recording this in 2025, and there has had to have been so much of this contextual learning intelligence that's been going on to be able to adapt to those situations and be able to figure out what is needed for the communities, but also first responders and what they need in order to find those who are missing and those type of things. So definitely an important type of intelligence, especially for certain career fields.
Oh, good point. career fields, because not everything, and we're going to go over primarily we're going over Sternberg and his triarchy theory, but you want a mix of all of this, really, and that kind of who makes us who we are. So we all have a bit of contextual intelligence. I like to think of this on a slider, like you do, like if you're playing a video game and you have a sports figure or something, and you're adjusting your strength and your mental ability, speed, all of that stuff. We're all in these sliders of where we're at with those that make us who we are. So it's kind of that component, I think. That's super interesting.
So the other type of intelligence is this cognitive academic, the analytical intelligence. These are individuals that score really high on exams, do well with research. And there's a bias in our culture that is the most important type of intelligence, is really book smarts, right? And so in my experience, I'll give you one example. I had the opportunity to work with an engineer who was the top 1% in this specific category, brilliant, gifted individual. But when it came to how we were going to get to the parking lot, to get to lunch and get back, it took him a long time to process that information. And so again, oftentimes, we're gifted in different ways. And I think, again, that bias is if you're not scoring high on the exam, then you're not smart. And what we're saying here is that's absolutely not the truth. We're talking about 3 different types of knowing and understanding, and they're all equally valid. And as a matter of fact, Shannon and I do a presentation on emotional intelligence. And what we talk about there is the students who have that emotional intelligence and that ability oftentimes do better career-wise than students that are really high on the cognitive or academic end, because they're able to balance the relationships and connect with people, and oftentimes end up excelling in their careers, while they think from this bias and culture that that's not going to be the case. They think, oh, I never got the top grades, I never got all A's, so therefore I'm not going to be really successful in business or management. And that absolutely is not the truth. That's a fallacy from our culture.
And it's super interesting to me that you brought that up about the 3. So when we're talking book smart, we're talking about the sub-theory of componential, and the Marine Corps is kind of cool how they promote. So I don't know the name of what it is they do. So if there's any Marines out there listening, please feel free in the comments to correct me or to give me the correct name for it. But what they basically do is, to get promoted, you take a test, right? That's part of it. You also have your physical tests and stuff. So the people that score in the top third, they take 1 from the top third. So the top person from the top third, top person from the middle third, and the top person from the bottom third.
That's interesting.
And that's how so they get a big mix of intelligence, right? Because maybe there's an extremely contextual person who's in the Marine Corps who's just amazing in combat under pressure, but he's struggling with the test or whatever, right? Still going to get captured in those promotions. So they kind of left that fallacy of componential intelligence, book smart being the top behind by doing that. So if there's a name for it, I forget what that is. And I was never in the Marine Corps. I just heard it from some Marines. So anybody in the Marine Corps, give me a holler in the comments. Let me know what it is.
Right.
But it's really important, right? And you get a more diverse workforce that does better.
Right. Because they're problem solving in different ways, right? So, Craig, you were talking about this componential type of intelligence, and that's all about problem solving. But because we have the experiential, which is our creative intelligence, right? That's one we haven't touched on yet. We have the experiential aspect, which is contextual, right? So they're using, again, you use the word street smarts, but they're adapting to the situation. And then we have those who are analytical and using problem solving skills in a more analytical capacity. And so they are going to problem solve situations in a very different way, right? So think of our creative intelligence as well. So you could say to those who have strong and creative intelligence too, like here's the problem. And it could be anything. I can't speak much to the Marine Corps, so I'm not going to even try to give a problem for there. But let's think of workplace situation. Let's say that a supervisor throws out a situation like, hey, we need to have some creative thinkers out here. We need to brand this product. Okay. And I want my creative thinkers out there creating some type of advertisement that's going to bring buyers in. So your creative thinkers are thinking outside the box, that creative intelligence. And so they're still problem solving, but in a completely different type of approach than those componential type of thinkers. Does that make sense?
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
So that's your experiential theory, right? Sorry, Craig, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's experiential, innovative, this creative intelligence, imagination, insight, innovation. And these folks are really critical because oftentimes we get into this groupthink mentality where we all kind of think along the same lines. But if you have someone with this intelligence, what they'll oftentimes do is they've got this creativity and they're able to think outside the box, like Shannon was saying, and come up with a totally new creative idea. And I've had the pleasure of working with many students that have this type of gifting. And I'm continually amazed at how they've taken a pretty basic assignment and they're able to think through a really creative way at addressing it. And for many industries, like Shannon said, marketing, there's a lot of different industries where creativity is really critical and it's important. And for me, I don't have that background. I'm not that creative. So I'm always really encouraged and impressed when I have the privilege of working with people that do have that creativity.
Well, it's interesting. So when my kids were younger, we had it was a video game. It was called Einstein or something like that. But it was all about, they put you in a situation and they say, okay, so this is what you have to do. Like one was get out of a room, and they gave you 3 things, weren't even tools. They were just things, right? And you had to use them in non-traditional ways. So not what they were meant for. You had to use these things in alternative ways to get out of the room or turn on the light or whatever it is. And it's
I love that.
In this conversation, thinking backwards, it's kind of neat how all 3 of those intelligence work like those sliders, and the ones with the experiential, componential, or even the contextual, how they problem solved creatively, right, in their own ways, depending on where their sliders were.
Right.
That's kind of, I wish I would have known that, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And then maybe
yes,
I could have been a better dad.
Well, it's so interesting too. I love that the concept of this game. It reminds me of, whenever you have team building activities, right? You might be given some type of opportunity to think creatively. And I'm thinking of this situation where there's something with a bucket in the middle and you have to lift it. Do you guys know what team building exercise I'm talking about? But the way people approach it is so very different based on, George, you're talking about the slider, like where maybe their strengths are in the different types of intelligences, but the lens through which they look at solving the problem is very different. So this is why I love team building exercises, because we have to listen well to other people and we have to be able to look at the situation through their lens and say, okay, that could actually work. It might not be what I do, but that could work in this situation. So team building actually taps in a lot of times, depending on the exercise, to these type of different intelligences. Have you guys had a team building opportunity where you've been able to see the different people with different types of intelligences at work?
Yeah, Shannon, I'm thinking of a group team building exercise I was in. And normally it's the person with the experiential, innovative, got creative intelligence. Oftentimes that's the first to bring up an idea that I hadn't thought of. Now, my strength is more contextual applied, this practical intelligence, how we're going to adapt it. So the creative person is able to come up with the idea. Once I hear the idea and I start looking at the different players on the team, then I'm often able to step in and say, okay, this is how we're going to implement the idea. That would be one of my strengths I bring to the table. But I think that's pretty common for me. I'm not the creative person up front saying, hey, let's do it this way. I'm usually sitting back, waiting for the creative people to step up. And then I'm thinking, okay, how can I help to implement this?
I like that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I guess this would be a good point to say. So the Sternberg sub-theories are actually evidence-based.
Right.
So there's proof that they exist. And then if we move to somebody like Gardner, who has, is it the eight
There's eight.
multiple intelligences, or the multiple intelligence theory, which I love, I'm a fan of,
Yeah.
but it's not evidence-based because there's too many, not detractors, but there's, oh, what word am I looking for, Shannon and Craig? You know what it is. Too many, well, I'm not in English.
Variables or?
Yeah, too many variables that we can't prove it,
Yeah.
or support it, but it's highly possible. So Gardner breaks it down to 8. And the one you brought up, I think one of the most interesting parts of the conversation, Craig, when you started talking about the course that you and Shannon give, I believe that's to our young leaders in emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Actually, in addition to that, one of my favorite classes I teach is called Psychology of Emotions. And it is all about emotional intelligence. And we're an applied psychology program. So in that class, every student identifies someone in their life who they've had a conflict or have had a conflict with. And each week there is an emotional intelligence type exercise, tool, or technique, something that you would use with future clients. And they are applying it in their own life to whatever this conflict is in this relationship that they have with that person. So they are learning in an applied setting how to practice emotional intelligence through these different tools, techniques. Like, for example, the ABCDE model by Ellis, where they're learning how to identifying their belief of a situation, and they're able to deconstruct that, so to speak, and try to figure out, okay, is this even accurate thinking? Why am I thinking this way? So there's different, and then the emotions attached to that. So there's different exercises. Students love this class. All the time they're just talking about, well, this is so practical. Well, they're learning the tools of emotional intelligence, which emotional intelligence is basically being able to identify and understand the emotions within yourself and how to manage them, but also to identify and understand the emotions in others. So empathy is a really critical skill of emotional intelligence. But we're teaching students how to learn these skills and tools they're going to use with future clients so they can teach others how to build strong emotional intelligence as well. So, of course, in our field, it's really critical that therapists, those who are working in social work, whatever school counseling, whatever particular field they're going to go into, they have to have strong emotional intelligence in order to work effectively with people. So one of my favorite types of intelligence is, and like Craig said, what we've seen from the research is that it's really important, not just in things like, okay, we're in a human services field, but in the business field and leadership, that type of career path as well. If you don't have a leader who has strong emotional intelligence, it's very challenging to get maybe your team to be on board all the time.
Yeah, and so Goleman's one of the thought leaders in this area, and he's got 5 categories or 5 domains. Shannon touched on this. The first one's self-awareness. So recognizing how our own emotions impact others. And that's oftentimes what we do in the applied psychology field. We're doing work. We're looking at, okay, what triggers me? Why are these things triggering me? And then how does this impact other people? Self-regulation is the second one. This is managing my emotions. So if I'm in a group setting or group context, I have an impact on the team. If my emotions start, going up and down really quickly, I'm not regulating really well. The third is motivation. And this really gets at how do I motivate, encourage others? The fourth is empathy. A lot about empathy is about active listening and letting people know that you're hearing what they're saying and you can relate. And then the fifth is social skills. But I want to highlight what Shannon shared about that. I've worked for a lot of managers over the years, and the managers that have these skills of these 5 different areas are really able to bring a team together and develop a vibrant and dynamic culture. And it's so critical. And it's oftentimes in higher ed and academia, we don't look at these things. We oftentimes, faculty members, they oftentimes are really strong on academics, but this is a whole different animal. This is really about social and cognitive and understanding other people and understanding yourself and the relationship between the two and how you can essentially have a positive impact on helping a team achieve its goals.
Man, such important stuff. And how we display our intelligence, or what we know, whether it's under a sub theory of Sternberg or emotional intelligence. Well, I guess emotional intelligence would fit under a sub theory of Sternberg, right? Absolutely would. I didn't think about that, but it fits. But it has a very tactile effect if you're leading. So if you're in leadership, it has a direct effect on your team. It has a direct effect on how you interact within life, the way your intelligences are. So that is extremely interesting. So this has been a great conversation, and this was brought to you by the Los Angeles Pacific University Psychology Department. And this is what learning feels like.